Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. And today we are joined by, well, it's a local Sunderland journalist. You pretty much are these days, Matty Hewitt. But Matty Hewitt working currently, I think, mainly on the Chronicle. Is that right?
Yeah, doing bits and bobs. I mean, my job's changed that much over the last 5 years. I still like to get Sunderland when I can. Obviously, I've been to more presses this year, I think, than I have in previous years gone by. But yeah, good to be back covering the red and white.
Yeah, it's been. I mean, you're at the Northern Echo for a while covering Sunderland as well. So you've been sort of all over the place, haven't you, in the Sunderland world?
Yeah, I had so I started off obviously covering Sunderland maybe in the middle of COVID, but back in the glory days. And then, yeah, job changed a fair bit. Still at the Chronicle, still covering Sunderland for them. And then had we'll call it a loan stint. I had a loan stint at NewsQuest, and obviously we set up We Are Sunderland there. And then back at the Chron. Yeah, just doing bits and bobs, trying to get to as many Sunderland games as I can, really.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, so today we're going to talk about Sunderland over the last 5 years. I thought you were an ideal person to talk to about the progress of the club in the last 5 years. We're obviously going to touch a little bit on Nottingham Forest, preview Man United, and then sort of go over some overall feelings about the season in the Premier League in general. But I want to start with, you talked there, started covering the club in COVID. That was a weird time. It was only 5 years ago, but it feels like the rise of 5 years ago where we were watching, certainly for me anyway, watching the games on the telly against, I can't even remember any of the games. Like, that's how ridiculous it was. The behind closed doors. Yeah, they just fade into insignificance. But are you shocked at how quickly the club has sort of got itself to this point?
Yes, simple as that. Like, I think if you look back, so it was my first sports journalism proper full-time gig. I'd done obviously like bits behind the scenes at Gateshead. I'd covered clubs when I was down in Lincoln, but I'd obviously been to Sunderland games, as in the press box for like against in the FA Youth Cup, like Sunderland against Newcastle, those sort of games. So I was used to sort of an empty stadium, like, because there's nowhere near. Nobody gets into those games really, do they? Obviously, there's odd fans do get in, but to then go back and like I'm watching competitive football just in front of nobody, and I was like, what have I signed up for here? They didn't get a win, obviously, in the first few months of me covering them at home. It was back in the day of obviously COVID, limiting travel. So it was just James Hunter, who I worked with at the time. He was the one going to away games. He was getting all the points on the board. Now it's just getting like Mansfield FA Cup defeats at home and stuff like that. It was far from ideal. But yeah, in terms of like how far the club has come in that time, I think like I've seen posts, and I'm not going to name drop people because I just think it's a bit unfair. That's the level that Sunderland were at the time. But from the midfield that they did have to like Granit Xhaka starting at Forest, I mean, come on. He was an invincible in the Bundesliga, like 2 years ago? Ballon d'Or, like, I don't think anybody would have predicted the summer that we've had to bring in those type of players. But you just left like thinking, like you left in awe, like sat there thinking, like, wow, what a journey. And if this is the start in the Premier League, then it's exciting times ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to ask you now, actually. I was going to, at the end of this section, ask you about sort of the plan for the next 5 years, because we saw when Xhaka signed, they talked about he's bought into the plan for like years and years. I think it was 10 years they even said, didn't they? Like, he's bought in that long. And obviously that stretches well beyond him being a footballer. What do you think the plan actually is for Sunderland? Like, if obviously football changes, it's difficult to plan because Sunderland could get 3 injuries this week. That means that they lose the next 6 games in a row. It can happen. But what do you think the club are looking at doing in the next 5 years? Where do you see, if everything goes well, where do you see this club going in 5 years?
Well, I'm going to backtrack to then come forward. So I think obviously when Kirill first came in, he outlined that 5-year plan. And if you'd asked me at the end of that Michael Beale, Mike Dodd's tenure, where just the wheels fell off, would there be a Premier League club this season? I'm going to be honest, I would have laughed. I would have been like, no chance. There's so much to do with that squad. But then obviously all it really took was a man with a plan. So now Regis is in the building. They have a platform. Now I think obviously it has to be consolidation at the start. I know they've had a brilliant start to the season. We'll get on to, perceptions from the outside looking in about who Sunderland have played and whatnot. But I think, first of all, consolidation. You've seen like Forest. I don't necessarily like the comparison of Forest and Sunderland, but they've gone and got Europe after consolidating for a few years. I think a lot has to go in Sunderland's favour for that to happen, but it has to be about, restoring Sunderland's reputation as a consistent Premier League club in the next 5 years. I'm not going to go drastic and say that they will get European football, but I don't think that's something like that is unrealistic. If you look at the current sort of dynamic of the Premier League with Man United struggling, I don't think they're going to struggle forever. But just clubs like that, you do notice like sort of a fluctuation in performances, don't you? So who knows? I think obviously consolidation first of all, and then we'll see where we'll go from there.
What do you think's sort of changed at Sunderland? So I want to talk through a little bit the League One. We get out of League One with Alex Neil, and then we have that issue with Alex Neil where he leaves. And at that point, me as a fan, you as a journalist, we're thinking, well, this is weird. Why would Alex Neil leave Sunderland for Stoke? Yeah. That was strange. Mowbray came in and I'd always felt like wasn't 100% happy with how the club was operating behind the scenes. We then had the disaster of the Mick Beale, Mike Dodds, and then Regis comes in and the whole team, everything just seemed to shift from him coming in. What do you think changed in that sort of 2-3 years where we had managers who were clearly not happy with how the club was operating to somebody who's come in and whether he's just slotted in or he has changed things at the club? But what do you think's happened there?
I think I'm going to use a Christian Speakmanism here and say alignment. I think this, for me, feels like the first sort of head coach who has been able to seamlessly buy into the way that Kirill, Christian Speakman, now Florian Gazolfi all want to work. I know we do have sporting directors in this country now, and you see that quite often, but it was a European model. It has happened at Sunderland in the past, didn't necessarily work. We now have this model where I think Regis is used to working under that system, from France. I don't necessarily think Tony Mowbray, he was brilliant at Sunderland, don't get us wrong, but I think he wanted a bit more sort of control. I don't necessarily think he got everything his own way either. Whether that's right or wrong, hindsight, we'll never truly know, will we? Alex Neil was a strange one because, again, I think he wanted to manage the squad and didn't necessarily get everything that he wanted either. I feel like Labrie has again, he won't get everything he wants, from conversations with the club high rate. But I feel like there's a lot more, not give and take, but I feel like this current setup feels a lot more like everyone's on the same page.
In terms of who deserves credit for the last sort of 18 months, how do you balance that out? Because I look at obviously the manager and certain players. You'd look at, you look at the squad that got us up and how well they performed, the manager, how he's got them playing. But do you think, somebody like Stuart Harvey, for example, is somebody fans just sort of, I'm guilty of this. I'll look at Speakman, I'll look at Gazolfi and I'll praise them. But I forget that Stuart Harvey is the one that's essentially the eyes for these people to determine these are what you go for. But who do you think deserves the most credit for what's happened at Sunderland over the last sort of 5 years?
To be fair, I think you've actually got to look at it as a collective effort. Like Kirill's gone in there with a plan. He's brought Christian Speakman in. It's all these components and sort of even the likes of Alex Neil, who we've spoken about. Lee Johnson actually was tasked with putting that squad together. Now it didn't end well, but he still brought in a lot of that squad who ended up getting promoted. Some of them are still here. Like he was giving Dan Neil regular game time, Dennis Sirkin, obviously Trey Hume was there, albeit not playing a lot. You have to look at the 5 years as a whole, I think, and just praise them as it is. I won't pretend that they haven't got stuff wrong. So in the Beale sort of period, I don't think it was the right decision to sack Tony Mowbray from a football point of view. Just looking at where results were, we saw obviously everything that happened afterwards. It's easy to say that, isn't it? But the Michael Beale thing, that was a situation that just went drastically wrong. There've been mistakes along the way, but I think the ethos has been consistent throughout. So you have to praise, the big picture. And Kirill's gone in there with an idea, never owned a football club before, really young, gone in there, and you've got to praise him as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think if you look at the end of that 23-24 season, we finished 16th. They obviously took ages to appoint the new manager and stuff, but the fact that they held firm on that, because there was a lot of clamour within the fan base. Now, and I'll say I was not one of these people. I was firmly in the camp of I like what they were doing. I know we had a bad season, but I liked the buying the young players and seeing them develop. I saw what the vision was, but obviously it just didn't go well. But the fact that the club stuck with that and went, no, we're doubling down in a sense, but we are going to tinker with it. Do you know what? We've seen that buying just young foreign players is not going to work. We are going to add an Alan Brown in them. We've seen that with the business they've done this summer as well. But I think that little flexibility there was absolutely massive for getting where we are. And I think the club deserve a lot of credit for sticking with largely the principles they've had, but tinkering it so that we got the most success out of it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think going into that summer window, Tony Mowbray didn't necessarily get, again, the players that he wanted. He got Bradley Dack, but I mean, we've seen how that one panned out. It didn't work. There has to be again an alignment. Everyone has to be on the same sort of page. Now, I don't know whether at the end of that season they've looked at the squad and went, you know what, we're right. I remember at the time discussing, like, should they hand Corey Evans a new deal? That's the type of conversations we were having, because we weren't privy to what type of manager they were going to come in. Sunderland actually obviously came really close to appointing Will Still before he turned them down. I think that's forgotten about. You do have to have a slice of luck in football, no matter who you are. And to fall on Regis Labrie, obviously he was a candidate throughout. He was somebody who they were monitoring, tracking. To fall on that, having already been sort of turned down by your number one target, to then land on this man and fully back him, I think that's, yes, the right with the courage of their convictions, but at the same time, you have to have a bit of luck along the way. And I think that, I don't know whether it is a concerted effort, but I think they've got to have seen how that young squad was struggling that year under Michael Beale, Mike Dodds. I remember speaking with Alan Brown when he first came in on, like, it was the pre-season tour in Albufeira, and instantly you felt like there was just sort of I don't know whether that was just from speaking to him, you felt like there was a bit of a switch in that pre-season camp. There wasn't necessarily like a bucket load of experienced players. I think Wilson's came in, obviously he was still really young. There was a mentality shift that summer, I think, and I don't know the reasons behind it, but I think when you look at it now and you look at the type of players who they've brought in this summer, speaking, your Granite, your Nordi Mukiele, who's obviously 27, 28 maybe, those sort of players are going to be fundamental to Sunderland staying up this year.
Are you surprised? We'll talk a bit about the transfer business from this summer, but are you surprised that the mentality of last season? Because I think the one thing I would say about the Sunderland team last year was that they had a really strong mentality, especially for a young group, but it felt like the group was together more so than a lot of previous Sunderland teams. And look, I've been in the inner workings of the club in the past. I know that under Jack Ross, that squad was not necessarily united. And you could tell by looking at things to do with the club now that the squad is united. They're all seem to be on the same page. There doesn't seem to be cliques. It feels very much like a happy dressing room. And I think it's wild that they've added in so many players and they've actually lost a lot of that core group. I mean, 3 players at the weekend were starting who were in the playoff team. Like, they've lost a lot of players and they've moved players around and they've demoted players in the squad. Dan Neal is not starting games, he's on the bench. It has shocked me, though, how this new group of players have continued that mentality. And does that therefore mean that we can come to the natural conclusion that actually it's the head coach who has been the consistent one, who's got this message and has this way of getting his dressing room all pulling in that same direction?
Yeah, I think Regis Labrie does actually have a lot to sort of answer for in that regard. I remember, again, like the pre-season tour in Albufeira, everyone will look back at the videos, but you saw straight away, like, there was players talking about how tough it was. That was Labrie early days, figuring out which players had the right mentality, who would buy into his way of playing and who wouldn't. Now, at the end of that window, we saw players leave. Now, again, I've spoken a lot on other podcasts about the previous summer window being really poor. The fact that we saw like the likes of Luis Amir Semedo go out on loan, we saw Timothy Bembele, Abdullah Bar, all players who were sort of encouraged to be played the previous year. I'm going to be honest, brutally honest, they just weren't good enough. That summer transfer window was not good enough. To then see Labrie go in with that group of players, who I think they've had a point to prove, those players as well. The young group. You touch on the mentality just before there, and I think your likes of Job have played a massive part in that. They knew they were better than the year before. Like, the way that season finished, that group of players knew that they were far better than what they performed that year. And then again, we'll see it again. It's been so easy to buy into, and I still think there's an element of that point to prove now. There's a point to prove. Like, your Dan Neils aren't necessarily playing, and I thought about this the other day. It's somewhat of a tangent, but Granit Xhaka's in the latter stages of his career now. Just because he's come in and he's playing and Dan Neil's not playing at the minute, there's nothing to say that there won't be like a natural sort of handover. I think that sort of conversation's been lost because of just how good Granite has been since he came in. I do think the likes of Dan Neil, like Dennis Serkin, who I think's been brilliant, didn't have his best game in the playoff final and struggled with injuries. I know there's going to be conversations there, when do we call it a day on the injury front? But that core group of players that they built from League One, like your Trey Hume, consistently playing with the right mentality, that's seriously got this football club like a long way up the ladder, and I don't think it can be understated.
No, it can't. You are right. Right, let's talk a little bit about Nottingham Forest before we preview the Man United game. But what impressed you the most about us in that game? We've had obviously a few days now to digest it. I have personally sort of looked at, we've actually given away quite a lot of really dangerous chances every game. We have, Chris Wood, for example, should be scoring that header. We'd be talking about something very different if those players had been clinical. We saw it against Aston Villa where Watkins in the last minute of the game, he should score his header. Hell, you can go back to the playoff semi-finals where Had You Right should score his header at the end. But to me, I've sort of come away from this and I've thought, you know what, the luck is shining a bit on something. That's not to take anything away from us.
Yeah.
And I think we'd be very impressive. But I feel like the luck is shining on us. But what do you make of the performance against Nottingham Forest and also overall the direction of travel for us and how we're playing so far this season?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, I do think you need to have an element of luck on your side, but at the end of the day, you're not going to complain when it's going your way. I thought the start of the Aston Villa game, I thought this is where Sunderland are actually, from the fixtures that they had ahead, this is where we're going to, even Palace to a degree, this is where we're going to start to see what Sunderland are made of this season. Now, people externally will look at that run of games and think, they've had it easy, but you've got to beat the teams that are in front of you. It doesn't matter what they're going through. If you don't, if this easy start, you don't get any points. You're all of a sudden thinking, well, where are the points going to come from? So I think that is what's been particularly impressive. I don't think we've seen Sunderland at their best by far. They have played well. I'm not taking anything away from that. I just don't think we've seen them, full 100%. I think what's particularly in the Nottingham Forest game, how well they defended. Now they are giving away chances. Now I will agree with you that that's something that is slightly concerning for me. But at the same time, you've got players like Mukiele and Alderete who are turning in performances week in, week out. It's not always going to stay that way. It's a Premier League. It's a tough business. I think just again, every performance has been gritty. To come from behind against Aston Villa with 10 men, they found a way to get back in the game. That's what I think's been so impressive about sort of the transition under Regis Labrie. Is sometimes maybe Sunderland could be accused of not finding different ways to win a game. Like I think back to the Blackburn Rovers like championship game where they got thumped at home and they went like they conceded and you just thought, oh, here we go. But there's not that feeling now when they concede. It's right, we can get back into this game. We're going to have a chance. We're going to have an opportunity. I just think the way that Labrie's set up is so pragmatic. In particular, you see like a Palace and Forest to be able to hit teams like that on the counter and still have such a good defensive structure. I think that's what's been, for me anyway, the most impressive. I know they're conceding shots, etc. But, I think if Roofs in particular at Forest, he does pull off a number of good saves, but they're not something where I'm looking at my goalkeeper and thinking, yeah, that's a sensational save. He's really kept Sunderland in it there. He's been great when called upon, but I don't think Sunderland. It is a funny one, isn't it? Because while they're conceding, shots on goal, you're not looking at a game coming away thinking, "I've been battered there." Like
no, well, I think as well. The other thing is like me as a Sunderland fan. I am looking at the games maybe in a different way where I'm not maybe accepting the fact that you can defend the best game ever. But fundamentally, if Amari Hutchinson, as it was in this case, puts in a perfect ball onto Chris Wood's head, there is literally nothing you can do about that. And I think that maybe that's something that I need to get used to. The fact that Premier League games, you can be brilliant, but you can still get done with something that is not in your... I mean, look at the Burnley game where Cullen scores that goal. That goal... maybe we could have closed it down, but fundamentally, it's just a well-worked goal, and he slaps it in the corner. There's nothing you can do about it. And I think that maybe in the Championship, there's more chances for both sides. Therefore, you don't remember the misses as much. Whereas maybe in the Premier League, you just have to accept that. You know what? Like fundamentally, Crystal Palace, Nottingham Forest, Aston Villa, these teams are going to create chances. because they're just very good.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? I mean, that Pino chance at Palace, but yeah, there'll be conversations about, the position and defensively, but that through ball I thought was brilliant. Just split the Sunderland team and he's through on goal. And again, sometimes you get luck on your side. So far, it's gone Sunderland's way. That's not take anything away from... I think they played really well. I actually think they played really well. You can defend and not have the ball. We saw Forest last year getting to Europe by setting up defensively. It can work. There's more than one way to win a football game, and you don't have to be going out peppering teams and battering teams. As long as you're picking up points and as long as you're winning games, you can't really fault them, can you?
No, that is true. What you sort of touched this before, but what's your view on the perceived easy start of the season? Because I watch a lot of YouTube content, I watch a lot of Sky Sports content, and I feel like there's an asterisk next to Sunderland there that they've played teams at the right time. And I would argue that is, in a sense, some of that's true, but like Burnley, second game of the season, their first home game, that was a terrible time to play Burnley. Much like for West Ham, it was a terrible time to play us on the opening day. Brentford, well, you got to play Brent. You've got to win. And we did that. We were 1-0 down in that game. We turned it around. Palace, yes, they had a couple of injuries in the game, but they're still Crystal Palace. They've still just beat Liverpool. They're still one of the better teams in the league. Villa, we can't help the fact that they've had a slow start of the season. We were down to 10 men for an hour, and we're still the better team. And then Forest, they get Ange in. They've hired a new manager. They've not won a game yet under him. We go there and we get a 1-0 win. There feels like the credit to Sunderland hasn't been there. It's all been very much, but circumstance. Context, that is why they're winning games of football.
And I think you have to look at where these sort of comments are coming from. They're coming from rival teams who are down there at the bottom. And that's the thing. That the whole premise is when a newly promoted side comes up, what are they told to do? They're told to take points off the sides around them. So people say, oh, well, the sides in the bottom six, you've played the sides in the bottom six. Well, Palace are in Europe and are unbeaten in 18 games. Just beaten Liverpool. You've got Brentford who've just beaten Man United. I know that's nothing necessarily to shout about, but this is the Premier League. Teams will take points off each other. Sunderland, you can't understate just how good the start has been. People will point at it and be like, well, they've had an easy start. But it like I said earlier on the flip side, if Sunderland don't get a point, everyone's pointing the finger and laughing and going, oh, well, there you go. It's, here we go again, a newly promoted side. There's the gap in the Championship to the Premier League. They're not good enough. Well, hold on a minute. Well, they've proven that they are. And I think a lot of that is coming from outsiders who aren't necessarily watching the games. I've been really impressed with Sunderland about, again, just touching on the transfer recruitment. Square pegs and square holes. Regis Abreu's system, not taking anything away from it. It's really simplistic in terms of players can come in. And I think you've seen by how quick of a start, how quickly adapted the new players have got, that, it's really simple to, the basics are there. Then you build and then you sort of develop it from there. And I think that's what stood them in good stead. I know that, again, when they got promoted last year, there was a conversation about and joke on social media about, Sunderland have to make up this 20-point gap to Leeds and Burnley, etc. But where those comments are coming from, it's a blank slate, it's a clean slate. They've gone again with this, style of play that in my mind is probably the most basic one out of the three sides that have come up. Admittedly, I've not watched a lot of Burnley, but I know that Daniel Farke's side like to play high press. They got thumped off Arsenal, and I know Sunderland might get thumped yet. But, I think Labre's so pragmatic in the way he approaches games that is what will stand Sunderland in good stead this season.
Okay, let's talk about the Man United game, because we talk about playing teams at the right time. This feels like one of them. We're getting Man United at the right time. But I think that this is a horrific game for Manchester United. And I spoke about this earlier on my channel, but I'll relay it to you here. I think that them playing a newly promoted team at home just before an international break, the expectation from Manchester United is they win that game of football before an international break. But because it's an international break, that Amarim's going to be sat there thinking, oh, well, this is a convenient time to get rid of me if we lose this game. And I think that Sunderland, because they're newly promoted, Man United fans are thinking we should win. But if you watch Sunderland, watch how they play, and you look at how Man United lost against Brentford, you would go, well, Sunderland are probably going to mimic what Brentford did. Sunderland will be pretty low block, pretty frustrating to play against. They've got pace. They'll try and hit you on the counter attack. They're not afraid to play a long ball. They're not afraid to utilize set pieces. In fact, their set pieces are one of the biggest strings. And if you watch Man United, they're really bad at defending set pieces. To me, this is just a horrible, horrible game for Manchester United. And I think that we've got so many ways that we can hurt them.
Yeah, I think if I'm a Man United fan watching that, I just think it stinks of a Ruben Amorim sacking. Like, there's talk that they won't do that until November for whatever reason, to reduce the compensation packages. However true those reports are, if I'm Sunderland going into that game, I've absolutely nothing to be afraid of at all. You talk about teams, that were down there last year and you want to take points. This is a brilliant time for Sunderland to go to Old Trafford and get a result. Like, I watched the Brentford Man United game, and the same, mistakes that United are doing. Like, I think the third goal, it was sort of touched on Match of the Day later on about like how easy long balls, or Monday Night Football, one of the two, long balls just punishing Man United. They don't know, like, they're struggling transition so badly, and that's what Sunderland are really strong at. Like, that's how Labrie prides himself on the quickly getting up the pitch, but by playing triangles down the side. I think it's a really good game for Sunderland to actually see where they're at, because this is a United side that's obviously invested 200 odd million in the front line. Like, if Sunderland can keep that quiet as other clubs have, then then you can start thinking, actually, like, what is our ceiling this season? What can we do? Where can we finish? There's always going to be that conversation in the back of the mind about how many points it took to stay up last year. I think it was something like 37. Spurs finished on something like that. But with, given the caveat that the 3 newly promoted clubs this year are doing better than, the 3 newly promoted clubs last year, I think it'll take a lot less points to stay up. But the United game in particular is really, really interesting for me.
Yeah, we are going to talk about the points total, because I think it is interesting for how many it'll take. But I think in terms of Manchester United, the other thing that Sunderland have that is fortunate is that Amorim is married to this tactical formation. So Sunderland know exactly how Manchester United are going to play. And look, there's been loads of analysis about his substitutions, how he moves. He always brings a defender on. He moves players all over the pitch. He's got Mount playing in the 10, then he's got him playing in midfield, then he's got him playing at left wing back. We all know that the issues that they've had there. But I think that Sunderland right now, in the coaching staff in the video room, they'll be looking at that, licking their lips, going, do you know what? We've got ways we can exploit this. I mean, I even look at that midfield battle. If it's going to be Casemiro, because I think he's back from suspension, and Bruno Fernandes, or Ugarte and Fernandes, then that midfield two going up against Xhaka and Siddiqui, I'm like, well, I think Xhaka and Siddiqui will have the legs on that. Like, I definitely think that we should dominate that area of the field. The 3 centre-backs, they don't get the benefit of that because the 3 centre-backs are slow. They play really, really high. And I can't see Harry Maguire or De Ligt catching Wilson Isidore if he's running in on goal. They don't have proper wing-backs. There are so many factors and things that I look at this Man United team and think that actually plays into our hands.
Yeah, I mean, if you'd asked me, if you had this conversation with me 18 months ago and you just said what you've just said, I would be like, yeah. But that's it, isn't it? It's legs in the midfield. And even with Rig playing in that sort of number 10 or most advanced number 8, however you want to look at it tactically, Sunderland have legs, like Talby on the break, whoever plays, Adingra, Lafay can find pockets of space. So I think that's it. I think the fact that Amorim is so wedded to this system, it's only benefiting, the clubs that are coming up against them at the minute, because they just look bereft of confidence and void of ideas. I can't get my head around why he doesn't change things. Again, I understand, some of the arguments that if he does change things, well, then all of a sudden he's sort of sacrificing, his principles, etc. But because in the same hand, we've got Labrie, who he does tend to line up in a 4-3-3. There was a lot of talk, wasn't there, about going to Forest and playing a back 5. And I get being wedded to those principles. And when it's working, it's fine. But it's not working for them. So it's, I think this makes for a really interesting matchup.
Well, the thing is, Labrie actually does change things. I mean, we've seen him change in game. He'll go, Amorim is never going to 4 at the back in a game. He's always sticking to that formation. Labrie will go 5 at the back if he needs to. He'll also play 4-4-2. We saw that in the Championship last season. So, like, he's flexible. I cannot understand, to be honest, like Ruben Amorim, and this is obviously not about Sunderland, but him just being, I can only play one way. I can literally only play this system and I'm not going to change. It means you're a bad manager, because managers look at their squad and go, how do I win this game of football? Well, this is what Labrie does. He looks at Sunderland and goes, how do we win this game? This is how we're going to play. He doesn't look at it and go, I just love 4-3-3 that much. No matter what, I'm going to play 4-3-3. I just cannot understand how Man United, one of the biggest clubs in the world, are in this position where they've got a manager who literally only plays one formation. And I think Sunderland will just be able to exploit it this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, fingers crossed they do, because that's a massive scalp. Like going to Old Trafford,
Yeah.
like for a newly promoted side and getting a result. Like you're right. It to say, you know, for when I said earlier about Labrie playing the same way, you're right. He does change things, but from the off, that's why they've conceded so few goals, I believe, because from the very get-go, they know their game plan. They know they're going to just see things out. The Aston Villa, the start of that game was like a chess match. It was just figuring each other out.
Yeah.
Then once Sunderland realised, yeah, these are there to be got at, and they got at them, you know, Villa crumbled. And I think especially if you can sit in at Old Trafford, take a bit of the sting out the game, and then just go and impose yourself on it, then that Old Trafford crowd could get on the back of them. I mean, how many more lifelines is Amarim going to get? And again, in hindsight, you know, after the game, you might come back pointing this, you go, you know, Sunderland might got thrashed. Can't see that happening at the minute, though. It might do. I just think, you know, the way that they set up Sunderland at the minute is so pragmatic. They are going to surprise big teams this year.
Yeah, I mean, anything can happen, Connor. You can lose any game. We got a player sent off in the first minute, like Chelsea did there, and you can lose the game.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Premier League generally, because I know we're only 6 games into the season. It might be premature, but I think this is a conversation worth having, because Sunderland being on 11 points after 6 games, no team has ever been relegated from that position before. And look, records are there to be broken. They could get relegated still. But what that means is, and especially with Leeds looking good as well, it means that one of these established 17 Premier League teams is likely to get relegated this season. And I think look at West Ham. They don't move on from Graham Potter, in my opinion, if Sunderland, Leeds, and Burnley are both sat at the bottom of the league with like 3 points between them, like what's happened in recent years. I don't think they do that, but I think that the teams are panicking. We saw a lot of stability in the Premier League last season around managers, because I think they all just knew that the bottom 3 were the bottom 3. This season, I think Sunderland, Leeds, and Burnley all look decent, and I think it's going to make for a very, very interesting season in the bottom half of the league, because we could see a team you would never expect to dragged into danger, and I think that's, for me, it's fascinating to see how that's going.
Yeah, I think had you asked me before, you know, immediately after Tommy Watson's goals gone in, I'm thinking, right, all 3 newly promoted sides have a big job here. And I know Daniel Farke still, you know, wasn't happy that Leeds didn't bring in a few more attacking players at the end of the window. Sunderland fans are going into this, you know, season absolutely buzzing because of the, you know, the players that they brought in, rightly so. I do think we're going to see, you know, 1, 2 maybe of the, you know, the established Premier League clubs go down this year. I think just Wolves, like they have struggled, and I'm not denying that. You know, the new bloke went in there and had a, you know, got them going a little bit. But this year, I'm thinking they're down there at the bottom of the league, and they've offered him a new deal. I was just scratching my head at that. Like, I just don't get it. Like, I feel like sometimes I know football's a business, etc. But you're going to then, if you've extended his contract as well, I don't know the ins and outs of it, so you know, feel free to point us out and tell us I'm wrong. But you're going to then have to pay out more money if you've extended his contract for like a certain time. Like in a financial world of PSR, etc., because I actually think that's got a lot to do with things in terms of, you know, these established clubs not being able to strengthen. So Wolves have obviously sold Cunha, etc. These clubs, and Sunderland aren't at that point yet, so these clubs are then struggling to, you know, bring in what they view as the right player to be able to, you know, kick them on again. There's a lot of clubs in the bottom half of the Premier League who are not stagnating, but I just feel like they've been plodding along for a bit. And, you know, we do need like healthy competition in the top flight, but we need clubs to be going down. It can't be the same yo-yoing. It's just so boring, like as an outsider watching that, isn't it? Like the same clubs going up, then getting thrashed every week, then coming back down. I mean, if you're one of the 17 and you're getting, you know, if you're looking at it from a business point of view, yeah, well, doesn't matter. We're not going to go down. We're not going to get relegated. So why do we care? But this year it looks different, and I hope it is different.
I think with Wolves, apparently their manager was saying that he was going to walk out. That's why I got a new deal, because they didn't want to. Yeah, strange.
So what if I'm looking at the points return that they've had, and he's saying I'm going to walk out? Right, like this is the thing as well.
Could you get a better manager? I suppose is their thought.
Yeah,
they're not a Sean Dyche team, are they?
Well,
they've never done that.
No, This is the thing, man. It's like I could go on a rant forever about the Premier League, man. There's like a just again, if I'm looking at like the blanket Premier League, I think there's a reluctance to take risks in terms of like managerial appointments and like transfer windows. So I'm looking at bringing it back to Sunderland. I'm looking at that transfer window that they've had. Nordi Mukiele from PSG, he's played it. I'm sure he's at RB Leipzig and Bayer Leverkusen. Like, this isn't a defender who hasn't played at like, the top level. He's playing the Champions League, and as a newly promoted club, yeah, it's a massive statement that Sunderland have gone out and got it. But if I'm like let's say an Everton or a team trying to get in the, like a Palace trying to get in the top half, like that's a perfectly shrewd addition to any Premier League squad. Like, it's testament to the work Sunderland have done. But I just feel like sometimes in the transfer, market, the fees are so inflated. Like, I think that's what makes Sunderland's transfer window so impressive. Like, the players they've been able to bring in for the prices that they have.
Yeah, I think it's interesting as well. Look at the centre backs. Like Alderete is in La Liga Team of the Year. Like, it's not like we've plucked him from Paraguay. Like, he's literally been playing in La Liga. And then Mukiele, as you say, it's the same thing. Ronaldo, I think Leeds wanted Ronaldo as well, to be fair. Siddiqui is another one. You're like, Siddiqui, I think, is in the books of Brighton, isn't he? Because it's the same ownership group. How they let him go? Because you look at Siddiqui right now, we're only 6 games in. He looks like a comfortable Premier League player, and he's 20 years old.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I don't like about the comparison between Sunderland and Nottingham Forest when they come up. Obviously, Marinakis is in a complete world of his own with, club ownership.
I don't think they're comparable. I think the only thing that was similar was the amount of money
spent. Of players. Yeah, the amount of players that came through the door. But you actually, again, but if it's just outsiders having this perception of how Sunderland are going to play. Oh, they've brought in 40 new players. We can say this now because it's been a good start. When, the going gets tough, then we'll truly see how much there's a buy-in. Can they deal with the physicality of the Premier League? And I don't necessarily mean, just like getting shoved off the ball, etc. I mean, like, you have Habib Diarra picking up an injury in training. Will there be these niggles along the way? I think, again, just going back to like Sunderland, square pegs, square holes. It's such a... It's not difficult to do, but it's a simplistic transfer approach that is working so far. And you're looking at like when Marinakis went in there and how many of those players from that year when they splashed the cash are still there compared to if you look at the Sunderland squad, you can actually still envisage, a number of the Sunderland squad still being there. And that's not a slapdash approach. It's a continuity of like, League One to the Championship, etc., etc. It's not, I think it actually does Sunderland's, recruitment team and the owners and the manager like a disservice just comparing that situation.
But people do that Burnley team and have Vincent Kompany. And again, I actually think that into the summer, the thing that irritated me more than anything was the newly promoted teams are getting relegated because nobody was looking at the context as to why those 6 teams were relegated. And you can go through them individually. Ipswich bought Championship players. That's what they did. So they were obviously going to be in for a struggle. You look at who else was there. Leicester, massive issues off the field. The squad got weaker when they went up. Southampton recruited to a manager who was not equipped to manage in the Premier League. Burnley, the year before, spent a fortune, but were trying to play a ridiculous style of play that worked in the Championship, but was never going to work when you're the weaker team. You had Sheffield United, who were absolutely hopeless and finished with like 12 points or whatever it was. They were bad. Luton, who didn't recruit, they spent about 25 million quid. So those 6 teams got relegated. None of them have done what Sunderland, Leeds, and Burnley have done this summer, which is basically give themselves a fighting chance by actually having decent recruitment. And it infuriated me watching things like the rest is football when you've got Shearer, Lineker, and Mikael Richards talking about Sunderland, having no idea, doing 90 seconds and just going, yeah, Sunderland will just go down because they're newly promoted. It's like, you've not looked at any of the context as to how that works. And it infuriates me when I see people compare what Sunderland have done to any team previously. I don't think any team has actually done really what we've done this summer.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, like, even after we sat there in the press conference after they'd gone up, Lafay is your first signing going up. Now, I don't necessarily think he's been show-stopping this season. He did have a good game, it was Brentford, I think it was. But come on, like, he's one of the best, like, creators when he played in France. Like, he's a £20 million signing. Tommy Watson just put the ball in the back of the net and there you go, he's your first signing. Like, that was a real statement of intent. But even then, I'm sat there thinking, like 6, they'll probably bring in 6 sort of players, bolster the first team, it'll be a struggle. this window has been really, really impressive. Like you
Yeah.
can't beat around the. Look, it might all come unraveled, but at the minute it's not. So we'll take it for what it is, and it's been a brilliant start, brilliant transfer window.
Yeah, and the only way it'll unravel, I think, is injuries, because there's nothing I've seen in the
Yeah.
first 6 games to say that this team will not be at least very, very competitive in the Premier League, which was the aim when they recruited them.
Yeah, I think even then, like, there's talk about AFCON, but you look at how tough those fixtures are as well. Like, are you looking at Sunderland really going, if they come away with points and that's a bonus, that's how you're looking at it. Not like they are free hits. I hate talking about games being free hits because, like, you know, you'd consider Man United like a free hit back in the day. And, it, you know, to some fans, it still will be. It's still the perception of, like, look, this is still like a top 6 club, you know, one of the biggest clubs in the country. Sunderland go there and, like, get points. Why can't they do it elsewhere? Like, you saw Burnley, like, play Liverpool at home, and I thought they were really unlucky. Like, I've maybe done Burnley a bit of a disservice with, but I do think they're the weaker of the 3 sides who will go down just purely on the fact that they haven't been able to pick up the results so far, grind them out. Like, I thought they were okay. I know it sounds silly because they've been thrashed off Man City, but I thought they were okay from what I've seen there too. It's these clubs. Scott Parker's more pragmatic than Vincent Kompany. These clubs that have come up are there to upset the apple cart. Like, they haven't necessarily all done what Sunderland's done, but I agree with you. I don't like the comparisons when you come up because there's so many factors behind the scenes. Like, you know, how have Sunderland been able to spend that much money? Well, obviously it's because they haven't, you know, they've got this huge fan base, commercial sides improving, etc. Like, yeah, you're right. I just don't think you can compare the two.
Well, before we sign off, let's just maybe have a prediction for how Man United's going to go. I'm not necessarily asking for a direct score, but in terms of lineup, I think I would probably go. I think you probably have to take Masuaku out, in my opinion. I think you probably take Chris Rigg out and put Lefay in that position, and maybe put a Dingra on the left. And I think you probably line up with Isidore again. So in terms of the defense, that probably means putting maybe Trey Hume at left back. I don't necessarily love that, but I didn't love Masuaku's performance, and I'd be worried playing him at Old Trafford. But how would you see the team going, and do you think Sunderland will get a positive result?
I think the Rigg one potentially. I just think the left back situation is more or less going to, you know, pick itself. I wasn't overly, you know, impressed when I saw Masuaku in the Carabao Cup, and I know he played at centre half. But I just think, again, like, square pegs, square holes. I think he's going to stick with that shape that he knows will suit Sunderland. I think the Lefay one's interesting, isn't it? Because they tried Lefay centrally in, like, pre-season and stuff, and it was something Labrie said in one of his pressers that it hasn't necessarily, they don't know his best position. So does he then play him on the left and get him to occupy those spaces in behind, like, the wing backs? I do think we'll see a Dingra come in, though. If Rigg does drop out, I would personally play Lefay centrally, a Dingra and Talby on the wings. I just think that the pace in behind will be massive. I think Mayenda as well. Wilson Isidore's great. I love him. And I found it interesting that Brobby came off the bench at Forest. I don't know whether that was more the physicality side of things. I don't know whether this is a game that would suit Mayenda more than Isidore, just in terms of, again, pace in behind. These are good headaches to have, though, aren't they? Like, I find myself every game thinking, well, when's Brobby going to get a chance? Is Gertruda going to come in? Just on that, I thought he should have scored against Forest when he went through. I thought, oh, come on, put it beyond any doubt.
You say dance through the defense, but actually he didn't. He just continued going in a straight line, and the defense just parted. We're just like, you know what, have a go. Why not?
No. I thought he should have scored, but again, it's like when we'll see these type of players come in, is it going to be a case of waiting for an injury, then you get your chance, or is there going to be a bit of tinkering here and there? I don't think Old Trafford away is probably, you know, the place to tinker when you can, you know, when you can realistically go and get like 3 points. Like, there's nothing, like I said, there's nothing to be afraid of.
No, there is not. Well, thanks, Matty, for joining me. It's been good to chat. We probably could have spoke about the state of the Premier League for a good while. One of my favourite topics at the minute. We didn't even talk about PSR or any of that good stuff.
Don't get started on that.
Yeah, if we had an Aston Villa fan or a Newcastle fan, they'd be whinging on about PSR, wouldn't they? But for Sunderland, we're in the PSR clear for the moment. come back to her in 18 months. But thanks for coming on. Thanks everyone for watching. Please comment below kind of what you think will happen this weekend against Manchester United. I'd be interested to know. Please like and subscribe to the channel as well. And we'll see you soon for another video.
Cheers, Connor.